Thank you all for joining us for another one of our recorded chats about Hauerwas's book. I'm looking for it so I can hold it up. 7 Last Words from the Cross, somewhere on my desk. Thank you, Bob. And whether you're reading it for the first time or for the 21st time, we're glad that you are joining us. This book is a real treat. I've enjoyed reading a chapter a week because it forces me to pace it and to think about it more. So I've got a question. So we're on the 4th chapter, which the 4th phrase of Christ from the cross is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? To me, this is the most well-known phrase from the cross, but I don't know if that's just my gut or if that's true. So a lot of our conversation today will actually center on suffering. Bob, do you have anything you want to add to kind of start the conversation before we dive into some of these questions?
I do think that you're right. The my God, why have you forsaken me? That really, those are the words most people know. And if you are a person of faith or have struggled with faith, they may be very confusing words. We've heard so much, or at least many of us have grown up with very forensic theories about why Jesus died, and there's some pretty awful stuff from my perspective now out there. But the sense of he is crying out because God has abandoned him, or he is crying out because somehow it's the weight of all of our sin that is holding him. We are in a sense the nails that bind him to the cross.
Yeah.
And in thinking about some of the early reading we've done, that's pretty anthropomorphic in the sense of that makes everything that's going on about us. And what I'm gaining new and renewed insights in is what do those words and what do these 7 words say about who God is? And that is the place, as followers, as disciples, I think we need to start.
Yeah, and that's a good place to start our conversation on these words for today. Because to me and to Hauerwas as well, and somehow this book is somewhere buried on my desk. You all can't see how messy my desk is. You're welcome. But Hauerwas seems to make the case that these words show us that our God and Christ in these words is entering into our suffering. And I just love that. It makes me think of Jürgen Moltmann writes a lot about this, and I think this is one of the ways that I have made peace with a lot of suffering and made peace with a lot of the questions of pain and evil and things like that in the world. And it's the book Crucified God. It's the big, thick version. And he kind of focuses a lot on Christ entering into our suffering. So in this chapter, we see Christ entering into our suffering. And where have you, or do you see this most in your life?
I think for me, a lot of my understanding about who God is as the one who suffers really didn't come until I was somewhere in my mid-30s and was doing some new reading because I was in a program that was supposed to help us become what the program is like, theologians in residence. The assumption at Emory was most of us been parts of churches and been raised to be a part of churches where we can run really good programs, but we rarely truly think about God. And I thought, if we had thought more about God, we might not have built such big buildings and done some of the things and made such enemies and condemned some people. Who is God? And it was beginning to read about the suffering of God and the suffering of God that we find all in the Old Testament. God suffers because of the people. God is suffering for the people. You see God looking down upon the people in exile or in slavery. And it's God who's coming because God says, I not only see your pain, but I feel your pain. And that's such a shocking concept, I think, to a world that's full of imperial, multinational corporations and the arms race and huge armies and all the ways we want to stay safe. I know we have to be wise and balanced, safety or whatever, but I would remember Frederick Buechner once saying about that old saying, the life you save may be your own. He said, well, actually, if that's the only way you live, the life you lose may be your own. And so there's this sense of risk and suffering. And I saw it practically, I know, when as a part of that program, I've been working with hospice. And having certain experiences with people, particularly people who were older and had some deeper sense of faith and a lot more maturity and a lot more trust in the mystery than I had, and those who had no connections at all to what God might be about in their lives. And I saw a trust in the mystery, and I saw a sense of endurance and a sense of peace all at the same time.
Yeah. I think I've seen it most. I've seen Christ's presence most in some of those moments of suffering or in moments of high anxiety. And I think of dealing with students in crisis or families in crisis, and that peace that passes all understanding. Like it shouldn't be a peaceful moment, or there shouldn't be a peace about it, but Christ providing that peace. I've said to many a person in the hospital bed that I see Christ standing there alongside us, because that's where I truly think Christ would choose to be, and that gives me a lot of hope. And I think that's a very that's one of my central things of faith. That's been a very grounding idea for me.
Absolutely. And perhaps you too, I was not really exposed to contemplation as a way of reading scripture, as a way of praying, and I at the very beginning of learning and training and spending time with the Shalem Foundation, there was this statement that says, contemplative prayer is intended to be a way to help you become aware of what is true and how things really are. And what is really true is that God and God's love is always near to you.
Yeah. So one of the quotes in the book that I just really liked, Hauerwas writes that God is most revealed when he seems to be the most hidden. When have you found that to be true?
Well, that's one of those sentences when I read it, I'm kind of going, okay, I'm going to read it again. And I'm going to try to not be a typical Western North American engineering practical mindset person who's in a hurry and wants all the answers.
Yeah.
Some folks just want the summary of the book, and others want to go on the journey. I think where I have found that to be true is there are times in my life when I just finally hit bottom, or what I think is the bottom, and I finally once again say, I don't have the answers, and I'm asking you for answers. And frankly, I'm not real happy, God, with your management style sometimes, but that's maybe on me. Help me understand, where are we going together, wherever that might be. And I think it's in that sense of, can I use that old word, surrender? That word of surrender, or the submission to God's power that's not not to be enslaved, but to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. And it's in the, I have to say, it's in the I don't knows when I've found in reading or in writing that somehow for me, God sometimes speaks when I write something that I didn't know God was going to say. And I go, oh, so I hear you, you are here, and you're saying, trust me, and let's take another step. So yeah, I think the hiddenness of God, at least in my case, has over time helped me grow up a little bit and trust the process of having faith.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's wonderful. It's one of those quotes I kind of want to write on a wall or something.
Good gracious, good gracious, gracious.
Okay, so I have a question, and it's a bit of a leading one because we've had some conversations off camera about this quite a bit. Hauerwas uses the phrase, we are the spared because God refuses to have us lost. Can you speak on that and that perspective on the cross versus the many justice atonement theories?
Well, I think on the one hand, depending on the church we grew up in and whether or not the cross was preached on at all, and depending on maybe what part of which one of Paul's letters we heard or preached, we missed out on the reality that it's hard, if it's near impossible to explain what's happening at the cross and the depth of God's love. And so what the biblical writers do is they try to come at that diamond a lot of different ways. But what happens is the facet that was part of our theology or our denomination or our particular preaching pastor becomes the truth for all time. And so it's a very forensic, we sin, which I believe in the sin and the power of sin and this inclination within us to have to make choices, and what happens when we see the choices of others who've gone on beyond before us have consequences in our lives. But I think we hear that as sort of, that's just the way to do it. God has to be beaten up because for some reason God the Father demands a piece of flesh. And it's like God the Father is the one who's got the cat of nine tails, who is taking the flesh out of Jesus's back. It's God who's hammering the nails in. And that really, I think, pushes a metaphor way too far. There are metaphors that deal with, how in salvation we are rescued, in a sense, from having been kidnapped by our worth selves. There are economic metaphors. There are all these different metaphors trying to, I think, basically say, God is going to do anything and everything to set you free, to know God's love, to know who you are, and to know that these people around you are God's children. Hauerwas writes out the early church hymn from Philippians 2:5 that though he was in the manner of God, Jesus, he chooses to humble himself. He chooses this. Jesus could have done anything, but what Jesus said was, knowing God's love is steeper and more staggering than you'll ever know. And I don't know if we can figure that completely out, but it's certainly touched my life to say I'm going to trust that God. To me, shows me who God is, and who that God is going to go to Egypt, and it's going to be with me during the Exodus in Sinai, and it's going to be with me in the jail, it's going to be with me at the cross, it's going to be with me in persecution, and not just be with me, but it's going to experience those things too.
Well, I think that's a good place to end us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.